So, hello everyone. Welcome to this week's installment of ClueCon Weekly. Joining us today is Carsten Bock, the CTO, one of the founders of Voice in Germany, and longtime friend of the open source community and expert in many things I don't know much about. So, thank you for joining us today, Carsten.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Would you like to start with a quick introduction about yourself before I start asking the difficult questions?
Sure. Okay, yeah. My name is Carsten Bock. I'm CTO and founder of Voice, and I would say I'm a long-time voice over IP veteran. I started back then 20 years ago, something in that direction, with the Z Express Router project, the ZR project. Later moved to OpenZR, later moved to Kamailio, and we did a lot of crazy stuff using open source technology back then. We did one of the first fixed line replacements in Germany, which was quite exciting. Then for some period in time, I was working at Telefonica for the German O2 branch, and I came across all this Ericsson IMS and all the legacy vendors we used at Telefonica back then, and I thought, well, based on open source, based on Kamailio, which I know quite well, I thought we could do something way more interesting. And that's basically how I founded Voice 10 and a half years ago, quite a long time by now. Yeah.
Nice. That's that's a long time. I mean, I've been in the industry for 13 or 14 years now, and there's a lot I still have to learn. So you've been around for a while. Yeah, so maybe we can get started from there. I know you have a little presentation. I don't know if you'd like to start from that, and then we go to questions. Would you like me to go into a few of my questions first? You prefer, or
Yeah.
your preference?
Let's start with your questions first.
Okay, so well, the first question is really many people in our space and will listen to the podcast really are experts in FreeSwitch and Asterisk, Kamailio, that kind of telephony. Can you give us a quick explanation about what IMS actually is and what NG Voice's products actually do with and instead of IMS?
Yeah, well. The IMS, the IP Multimedia Subsystem, it's in some of my old presentation, I called it the best of the 90s because it has been around for quite some time. It has even been around in 2G, 3G times, which is basically a way of providing voice over IP technology on mobile networks. I think on 2G, 3G, it didn't really matter because nobody really cared. Back then, they were more thinking about providing new fancy multimedia services. But now with 4G and 5G, this has actually really become a thing because on 4G is a data-only network. So you need to have some voice over IP technology to provide voice. And that's where IMS comes into the picture. And it's really, I would say, I've been working with ZIP quite a lot, and I think one of the biggest challenges we had in the early days was always to make it kind of interoperable, like working with various different components. And one nice thing about IMS is actually that it brings the architecture and all the interfaces from a technology level to a standard, which really means that you can seamlessly integrate any kind of zip component into this platform. And it really, of course, if you're operating on a mobile network, you have some special requirements. You want to have some bandwidth management in place. You want to have really one unified login. You don't want to provision some username, password on your phone. It should be all automatically provisioned by the SIM card and everything. And it really, the main goal of IMS was really to build one platform that works for all kinds of devices. And that's basically how it started. Well, IMS has been around for quite some time, and now with 4G, it's really becoming interesting.
Nice. Yeah, there's a lot in there. There is even understanding how phone calls actually get to a mobile phone is super interesting and not easy at all to figure out. I mean, it's
Yeah,
I've worked with MVNOs, but I was always sitting on the SIP side of things, like the pipe coming in from the main carrier, and we just build the applications around it. So it's really it's.
and if you look at mobile technology, sometimes it's so. If I tell my wife works in computer science as well, and once I told the girlfriend of my wife that, well, we are able to do bitwise packing for the voice coding just to save like 3 bits out of a byte just to save bandwidth. And she was like, "Yeah, you must be crazy." But
Yeah,
that's
no, in
amazing
our
how that
world
works
that
out.
matters.
And
What we do.
it matters for mobile networks actually. So yeah,
Cool.
every
Well,
bit counts.
yeah, because at the end of the year, the bottom line is made up of those saved bytes for many carriers and products. That's absolutely true.
Exactly.
Cool. If you'd like to share your screen and we can take a look at your presentation, it would be perfect.
Yeah, sure. Share my screen.
Worked earlier. Let's see if it works out now.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah. So I hope you can see my
Awesome.
screen.
Perfect.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I started this company 10.5 years ago, 2011, and I think back then I started with a very small team, with a very small budget, just a very few people. I think when I started the company, we were like 2 to 3 people. And by now, like 10 years later, we not only have the location in Hamburg, but we have various locations around the world. We are around 85 people now, which is quite huge. And I think one big thing which wasn't that important 10 years ago, but which is really important today is that everything that we do and everything that we build is really built in a cloud native way. Everything that we do is we are building with containers. We are running on Docker and Kubernetes. And of course, as you can imagine, 10 years ago, Kubernetes wasn't around. We started with Linux containers, and now everything is Kubernetes. And this is one thing which actually, if you look at big vendors like all the legacy vendors that are around for the mobile network, they're not able to do that simply because they didn't really start with that from scratch. I think today being cloud native is one of the biggest key assets when it comes to selling our product.
For sure.
Yeah, just to give you a quick overview of
Oh yeah, this is the interesting part. Let's go. Look at that. Look at the diagram, guys.
Yeah, it's actually really it looks more complicated than it is. And I think when I first started with this IMS topic, it was really like I was a little bit scared about all the new stuff that I had to learn. But in the end, if you look at it, you see a lot of diameter interfaces for bandwidth allocation, for bandwidth reservation, stuff like that. And of course, not so many people use diameter, but diameter in the end is just an evolution of radius, and I guess way more people know radius. So diameter is not that much of a black magic. And then if you look at various other interfaces like the MW interface and the GM interface and basically you name it, it's really all about zip. So again, nothing really spectacular there. It's really, except maybe that if you take the ISC reference point, as telco people love acronyms, but if you take the ISC interface, for example, then it's really just about taking the zip interface that we use there, bringing it into shape to say, okay, you need to have these headers in your zip message in order to be the proper messages sent around. And of course, what I really love about IMS, and I think it's really great. It's really, we provide a whole subset of features. We have a PCRF, which is not really voice related, more from a bandwidth allocation side, and we've got various other components. But really, it really allows you to mix and match components. Like we've got by now I'm totally surprised who uses mobile technology, but for example, we see quite a lot of interest in especially private networks and also some very special use cases. And then you come across some special features like mission critical push to talk, as they call it. And of course, since it's just an application server from an IMS perspective, you can easily plug this in using the standard ISC interface, works out of the box, which is totally great. And then, then basically there you go.
Wow.
Yeah, as you can imagine, being the new kid on the block, it was in the beginning, it was very, very challenging to integrate with legacy vendors. So I remember one of our first commercial deployments of the IMS, which was in Bulgaria or something like that. We had to work with legacy vendors, and working with legacy vendors is always fun because we had some issues connecting to their gear, and we asked their support like, why isn't it working with our stuff? And they closed the ticket with the note, works with our IMS core. And I thought, thank you for your information. And of course, the key to success there is really being standard-based, really checking all the 3GPP specs and make sure that everything that's in the 3GPP specs is also implemented exactly that way. It's really a key success factor when it comes to integration. A lot of legacy vendors, even the bigger legacy vendors, you see that they take shortcuts, that they do something in a not quite 100% standard compliant way. And but as soon as you really follow the standard, that's the key to success. And as I mentioned earlier, of course, everything that we do is cloud native. It's really based on Docker and Kubernetes and everything in this regard. And it's really, I think in the beginning, we had a quite different objective when it came to building everything on Docker and Kubernetes. In the beginning, it was very clear we wanted simply save resources on our lab deployment, really as easy as that. And we wanted to eliminate the human factor when it came to configuring of our stuff, like adding an IP address to some other component just because you're adding a new instance, stuff like that. And that was, as a matter of fact, that was the starting point why we actually started working with containers and with Docker and now Kubernetes, and now it's really great because that's the main thing people ask for these days, being really cloud native. Yeah, and okay, everything else, I think I've been working at Telefonica before, so I always had in mind like the things that we build should work for small networks, but also for 10, 20 million subscribers. So we always had a focus on really building everything scalable and robust and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's so. I was about to ask the question that's on the slide, so that's just perfect. Like why should a company need their own network, which is really super interesting.
Yeah, I think there are various key points that you have to think about when it comes to enterprise networks. And I think one thing, imagine you have a huge warehouse, for example, and you have some self-driving robots driving around in your warehouse, and they need to have constant connectivity. They need to constantly get orders. They need to submit their permission, their position, stuff like that. They need constant connectivity. If you do the same thing that you do on a private 4G, 5G network with Wi-Fi, for example, you always have the problem of doing a handover between one Wi-Fi cell and another Wi-Fi cell. So, and as soon as you do this on 4G and 5G, these networks have been built for doing a seamless handover between different network cells. So this works pretty much out of the box. Then the next thing, it's really critical for if you have robots, for example, robots that might assemble your smartphone or anything like that. Then you need to have guaranteed bitrate and you need to have guaranteed access to your network. So really, if you find out if your centralized system finds out that something is fundamentally wrong, you need to shut down the machine instantly, especially if there are people involved, for example. So there's a regulatory request, even in Germany at least, that you need to shut down a robot within milliseconds time. And the only thing that you really can provide this guaranteed connectivity is really through mobile network, which is, of course, one of the key things, I would say. And then, of course, there are various other topics like authentication, like security. You need a physical SIM card in your phone so you can access a network, which is a great thing in terms of security. One rather interesting aspect that I didn't come across myself was, like for example, our gear is deployed in a mine, underground, whatever. And they wanted that their mine workers have exactly the same user experience, so they could use their regular phone like they would do outside the mine, just inside the mine, for example, which I didn't think of myself, but they wanted that. And of course, last but not least, maybe you want to build your network there where nobody else wants to build your network. Let's say, I mentioned a mine, could be an oil rig, could be a ship, could be anywhere you want it. And I think it's really, really great. And it really did change a lot in the last couple of years. I remember, I think 8 years ago, when I was first looking into building my own little lab 4G environment. I think I got offers for building a lab network for 40,000 euros, quite a lot of money for a small startup.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah, and it was really by providing hardware and really huge gear, and by now you can actually run. I always take my small Intel NUC by now to presentations and whenever I visit a customer and say, okay, this could be your mobile network. And today everything can be done in software, which is totally great. And then you just take a simple off-the-shelf eNote B, which is
that's not even that large. I was
no,
expecting
not
it to
really.
be bigger.
No, and it's not even that expensive. That's actually even more interesting because like this one we bought in China, off-the-shelf eNote B, and it's like $500. So it's really okay. It's not that much of a financial effort anymore. And it really, and of course, being a cloud company, we can run all of our IMS core and all of the EPC, HSS, PCRF, everything that we need. Of course, we can run this on the cloud, but since everything is small and software, it can also just be a standard PC somewhere, which is, of course, quite great. Yeah. What frequently comes around is that we need to do some integration with legacy phone systems, like integrating with your existing phone system, stuff like that. And one reason is basically because people have already this in their office, so they want to keep on using it, and maybe the sales team and support team is using it anyway. And now by adding a mobile network, your people suddenly get mobile. They can walk around with their mobile phone. They can, while being on your factory side, use your own local private mobile network. But as soon as you leave your office side, you can actually even do outbound roaming and stuff like that, which is quite nice from a user experience. Like I just run around with my mobile phone all day, and I don't care about any fixed line phone anymore. And Yeah, and besides, of
So
course,
when you are, this will, so just as a quick explanation, just so I can understand, this will mean that when you are in the office, your phone connects to the local cell or whatever, and it effectively becomes your work phone while it's the same device.
exactly, which is really, really
Nice.
convenient. Really, really convenient.
And then you can just
Yes,
dial 103 to get to your colleague directly without
exactly,
any. Wow,
exactly.
that's super interesting. Is
Yeah, like I don't have a secretary myself, but if I had a secretary, she could even see on her busy line fields that I'm on the phone right now because maybe she wants to know that before she tries calling me. Stuff like that. All the
that's
usual things
very.
that, yeah.
And what's the range of one of those stations? Just curious.
Um,
Ballpark. I mean, we don't have to go into details now.
I think one of those things, those are the cheapest ones that we get, and those are like 100 meters or something like that. So that's still fine.
Oh wow, that's 100 meter doesn't sound like much, but it's a lot in office space.
Exactly.
Is,
As a matter of fact, I can stand in front of the office and still have a phone call using our in-office mobile network, which is good.
yeah, super nice. Cool. What else?
Yeah. So of course, I've been working with FreeSwitch, and I've also been working with Asterisk and quite a few other PBXs. So I wanted to highlight a little bit like how the integration actually would look like. And I made some slides and a small call flow, and it's really about following the standard here. And following the standard really makes it easy to integrate with all kinds of services. And surprisingly, if you look at the specs and everything that's being used in IMS, then it's really about like there are things that you use DNS SRV records for a lot, for example. And I always thought, before working on IMS, I thought using DNS SRV records is a good thing in terms of redundancy, and on IMS it becomes a standard. And also the stuff like subscribing and notifying when it comes to a certain presence status. So if for the integration with the Office PBX, we can actually deploy a simple application server, which is, as a matter of fact, it's a Kamailio instance, which will just react upon a register which is received from the IMS, indicating that my mobile phone is now available on the mobile network.
It's more or less
And then,
proxying
yeah,
registration.
it's really a third-party registration. It's really how to say that? It's really generating a new register, so to say.
I
Just
see. Yeah.
really indicating to the application server, this user is now online. And you can, as a matter of fact, if you do some other crazy stuff on your application server, like mission critical push to talk, for example, you can actually include a lot more information into that register than a usual register. And then, of course, you need to subscribe, notify, just to get updates on the registration info, which is pretty much standard, I would say. And what we do on our application server is, as soon as we receive this third-party registration, we trigger an outbound registration to the legacy PBX, which could be FreeSwitch, which could be Asterisk, which could be any kind of PBX that talks ZIP. And this basically allows us to see that the legacy PBX sees us as online, as registered, and it will start sending calls towards the mobile network. So there's no real special features required on the legacy PBX. It just needs to support a standard ZIP registration. And everything that you need to do is really use the standard Kamailio modules. I mentioned before, of course, if I had a secretary, maybe she wants to see that I'm on the phone. And again, there are standard methods to do so. So Of course, either I could simply route my calls directly through the PBX, and then the PBX would take care of generating a busy line indication on the other phone. Or I can use subscribe for dialogue info, which is available in FreeSwitch and various other PBX solutions. And there again comes the open source community back into the picture, because if you look at Kamailio, for example, Kamailio can actually, you can bind, there's a module in Kamailio that allows you to bind the subscribe notify functionality for, especially for getting the dialogue information distributed with the actual dialogue. So the phone, let's say my mobile phone, doesn't need to support this, but I need to have a Kamailio instance, my application server, which will do this on behalf for me. And that really allows you that that you get a busy line field on the Office PBX, which is quite great, I guess. Yeah, and I think
I mean, the that aspect. So proxying registrations that way is really super. I mean, it doesn't look too hard. I've done that. I was literally working on a similar project, not with IMS involved, but using Kamailio as a proxy towards the legacy PBX so that we could use signal wire services with them. And
exactly.
it's not hard, to be fair. It's the worst part. The worst part is syncing their credentials, because you don't want to be able to pass them on. And but I mean, in my own implementation, again, the hardest part is actually that. So getting the intermediate server to have credentials, so you don't have to propagate them somehow, which is unsecure. But yeah, that's, I mean, it's mind blowing. It's super interesting. And yeah, so let's say we explore usage that involves a company or a building or multiple buildings or whatever. You can do any kind of does your solution help MVNOs to do things differently than they use right now? I'm asking mostly because I used to work with an MVNO, and I did that for a long time together with our CTO, and it's a super interesting world. But I'm thinking about how could I use having my own network in that way.
Let's make it very concrete. Like, if we see this actually quite a lot in Europe these days, especially since 2G and 3G is getting decommissioned. That's a main driver for IMS on the MVNO world, and I think that's what we've seen in the past quite a lot was that if you're an MVNO, let's say on a 2G, 3G network, let's say on KPN in Netherlands, then you basically get a zip trunk towards your MNO.
Yeah,
so to say.
In usual case, you just get a big zip pipe towards your carrier when you're on MVNO. That's pretty much all you get.
Exactly. And the one point there is, of course, you have all this legacy circuit switch stuff that's been around for the 2G, 3G network, and this is no longer the case for the 4G network. So we see a lot of MVNOs, but also IoT providers who now start implementing an IMS themselves, simply because this old method that they used on 2G, 3G is no longer available on 4G. And all the MNOs say, if you want to provide voice on 4G, you have to deploy your own IMS. Otherwise, it's circuit switch fallback, and that's either not desirable, and B, it's not going to be around forever. So a lot of MVNOs are currently moving to IMS these days, and
your own network, of course. Yeah, exactly. The other thing I could think of is that you could blend the two modes. Like, say you are an MVNO that has their own network and carriers and in-network applications and stuff, because most MVNOs have some special kind of app that defines them. And you could also provide local cells to companies. So say you want to have signal in your company and you're with our Lucas telephone MVNO, exactly. You can just you ship them a box, they put the power in, and it almost just works, right? It's
exactly. Like even my cheap China boxes here, they are even powered using Ethernet, you just plug in one cable, that's it. And they can do auto provisioning even if you want to. So you don't even have to provision anything on the eNodeB themselves anymore. So off you go.
That's
really
amazing.
straightforward.
That's really amazing. Yeah, there's a lot to learn about this area, and we all, this is all the part that we all, including us and are in the business, we sort of take it all for granted because it works. Like if I need I live in the world where the most I do is IP addresses, right? I don't care. There's services there, we just talk to it. But how that layer works is the most important part.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, we went through so much. There's a lot to learn. People go look IMS up. It's how phones literally work these days, and go look up at NG Voice. Your website is very informative, by the way. So there's a lot that's super interesting there. And well, I mean, thank you, Carsten, for joining us today. It was really a super pleasure having you here. And it's not often we have someone from outside of the application server world. And thank you so much for the insight and your experience.
Thank you. Likewise. It was a pleasure.
And maybe we'll meet at some conference since conferences are back. Well, most important for us is ClueCon in October in Chicago. So go look up the website ClueCon.org and ClueCon.com, and we can. I mean, I think there's a special going on up to until next week. So today is May 26th, and up to first days of June, if I'm not mistaken. But if you're traveling to Chicago, I'll meet you there. Otherwise, we'll meet around maybe FOSDEM or the other European conferences. Who knows?
Definitely. I'll be around.
So thanks again, Carsten Bock, CTO of NG Voice, for joining us today.
Thank you. Likewise.
And for everybody else, I'll see you next week as usual. Thank you.